I want you to imagine something for a moment. It's 3 in the morning, you're lying in bed and your mind is racing. Maybe it's that embarrassing thing you said 5 years ago. Maybe it's worrying about tomorrow's meeting. Maybe it's replaying an argument you had with someone you love. You tell yourself to stop thinking about it. You command your brain to just shut up and let you sleep. But what happens? The thoughts get louder. They multiply, they become more intense, and suddenly, you're not just thinking about one thing anymore. You're spiraling through an entire catalogue of every mistake you've ever made, every potential disaster that could happen, every reason why you're not good enough. Sound familiar? Here's the thing that nobody tells you. The reason you can't stop negative thoughts isn't because you're broken. It isn't because you're weak. And it definitely isn't because you're not trying hard enough. In fact, I'm going to tell you something that might blow your mind. The harder you try to stop negative thoughts, the stronger they become. And there's actual neuroscience behind why this happens. But more importantly, there's a completely different approach to dealing with these thoughts that actually works. And it's probably the opposite of everything you've been taught. So if you're tired of being at war with your own mind, if you're exhausted from trying to control thoughts that seem uncontrollable, stay with me because what I'm about to share with you is going to change everything. Let me start by telling you about an experiment that was done by a psychologist named Daniel Wegner. He was inspired by something the famous Russian writer Fyodor Dostoevsky once wrote about. Dostoevsky's brother gave him a challenge as a child to stand in a corner and not think about a white bear. Of course, young Dostoevsky found this impossible. The more he tried not to think about the white bear, the more the white bear dominated his thoughts. Wegner turned this into a scientific experiment. He told participants not to think about a white bear for 5 minutes, and if they did think about it, they should ring a bell. Can you guess what happened? The participants rang the bell constantly. They couldn't stop thinking about the white bear. But here's where it gets really interesting. After the 5 minutes were up, Wegner told the participants they could now think about the white bear if they wanted to. And what happened? They thought about it even more than a control group who had been told to think about white bears from the beginning. This phenomenon is called ironic process theory or the rebound effect, and it's happening in your brain every single day. When you try to suppress a thought, your brain actually has to keep checking to make sure you're not thinking about it. It's like having a security guard whose job is to make sure the white bear doesn't get in. But to do his job, that security guard has to constantly be looking for the white bear, which means the white bear is always present in your awareness. Your brain literally cannot not think about something. The instruction to not think creates a paradox. It's like me telling you right now, whatever you do, don't think about a pink elephant wearing a tutu and riding a bicycle. What just happened in your mind? You saw it, didn't you? That's because our brains don't process negatives the way language does. When you tell yourself, don't think about the presentation going badly, your brain hears, think about the presentation going badly. The don't part gets lost in translation. Now let's talk about why negative thoughts specifically are so sticky, so persistent, so hard to shake. This goes back to something called the negativity bias, and it's actually an evolutionary feature, not a bug. Our ancestors who were more attuned to potential threats, who worried more, who were more anxious, were the ones who survived. If you heard a rustling in the bushes and thought, oh, it's probably just the wind, you might get eaten by a predator. But if you heard that same rustling and thought danger, threat, run, you lived to pass on your genes. So we're literally descended from the most anxious, most worried, most negative, thought-prone humans who ever lived. Your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do. The problem is we're no longer living in an environment where threats are primarily physical and immediate. We're not running from lions anymore, but our brains haven't gotten the memo. That same threat detection system that kept us alive on the savannah is now triggering when your boss sends you an email that says we need to talk, or when you see your ex posted a photo with someone new, or when you make a small mistake at work. Your amygdala, the alarm center of your brain, doesn't distinguish between a real physical threat and a social or psychological one. It treats them all the same. And here's another crucial piece of the puzzle. Negative thoughts aren't just more attention-grabbing than positive ones. They're literally processed differently in your brain. Research shows that negative information is processed more thoroughly than positive information. We spend more time thinking about bad experiences than good ones. We remember insults better than compliments. One study found that it takes 5 positive interactions to counterbalance 1 negative interaction. That's a 5-to-1 ratio just to break even emotionally. Think about that. You could have 4 great conversations and 1 bad one, and the bad one is what keeps you up at night. This is why you can receive 10 compliments and 1 criticism, and guess which one you're still thinking about a week later? It's always the criticism. Now, here's where most people go wrong in dealing with negative thoughts. They approach it like a battle. They think if I can just be strong enough, disciplined enough, positive enough, I can defeat these thoughts. I can push them out. I can replace them with better thoughts. And listen, I'm not here to tell you that positive thinking is bad. But what I am saying is that when your primary strategy is to fight against negative thoughts, to suppress them, to avoid them, you're actually making the problem worse. You're feeding the very thing you're trying to starve. When you try to suppress a thought, several things happen in your brain. First, you activate that ironic monitoring process that keeps the thought accessible. Second, you create what psychologists call experiential avoidance. This is when you're so focused on not experiencing something that the avoidance itself becomes a source of stress and anxiety. You're not just dealing with the original negative thought anymore. You're now also dealing with anxiety about having the thought frustration that you can't control it, and often shame or self-judgment about the fact that you're having these thoughts at all. It becomes a meta problem. You're not just worried about the presentation, you're worried about the fact that you're worried about the presentation, and then you're worried about the fact that you can't stop worrying, and it spirals from there. Third, suppression takes enormous cognitive resources. Your brain is working overtime to keep these thoughts out of consciousness, which means you have less mental energy for everything else. Studies have shown that people who are actively trying to suppress thoughts perform worse on cognitive tasks, have worse memory, and make poorer decisions. And fourth, perhaps most importantly, suppression prevents processing. When you push a thought away before you've really examined it, you rob yourself of the opportunity to actually learn from it or resolve it. Those thoughts often contain information. Maybe it's alerting you to a real problem that needs attention. Maybe it's reflecting an unmet need. But you'll never know if you're too busy trying to make it disappear. So what's the alternative? If we can't suppress negative thoughts, and fighting them makes them stronger, what are we supposed to do? The solution is actually much more elegant and much more effective than suppression, but it requires a fundamental shift in how you relate to your thoughts. Instead of trying to control what thoughts appear in your mind, you learn to change your relationship with those thoughts. This is the core principle behind several evidence-based therapeutic approaches, including acceptance and commitment therapy and mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. The idea is simple but profound. You are not your thoughts. Your thoughts are mental events that happen in your consciousness. But they are not facts. They are not commands, and they don't define who you are. Imagine your mind is like a sky. Thoughts are like clouds passing through. Some clouds are light and fluffy, some are dark and heavy, some move quickly, some linger. But no matter what clouds appear, the sky itself remains unchanged. The sky doesn't fight the clouds. It doesn't try to push them away or cling to the nice ones. It simply allows them to pass through. This is the stance we're cultivating. It's called cognitive diffusion, and it's one of the most powerful tools for dealing with negative thoughts. Diffusion means creating some space between you and your thoughts so that you can observe them without being overwhelmed by them. Instead of thinking I'm a failure, you learn to notice the thought I'm having the thought that I'm a failure. Do you feel the difference? In the first version, you're fused with the thought. It feels like an absolute truth. In the second version, you're observing the thought. It's something your mind is producing, but it's not necessarily true. Another technique is to add a little phrase to the beginning of your thoughts. Instead of "this is going to be a disaster," try "I'm noticing my mind is predicting this will be a disaster." Instead of "I can't handle this," try "I'm having the thought that I can't handle this." These small linguistic shifts create psychological distance. You can also practice labeling thoughts. When a negative thought appears, you can simply note thinking, worrying, or judging. You're not analyzing it, not engaging with it, not fighting it. You're just acknowledging its presence like you would acknowledge a car driving by. Oh, there goes a worry about money. There goes a judgment about my appearance. There goes an anxious thought about the future. This practice comes from mindfulness meditation, and research shows it's incredibly effective. When you label a thought, you activate the prefrontal cortex, the rational part of your brain, which helps calm down the amygdala, the emotional alarm center. You're literally changing your brain activity in real time. Now I know what some of you might be thinking. This sounds like you're just accepting the negative thoughts, like you're giving up. But that's not what's happening at all. Acceptance doesn't mean resignation. It doesn't mean you like the thoughts or want them. It means you're acknowledging reality as it is. The thought is here. Fighting it hasn't worked. So instead of wasting energy on a battle I can't win, I'm going to acknowledge the thought and then choose what I do next. This is where the second part comes in. Once you've created some space from the thought through diffusion and acceptance, you can then redirect your energy toward what actually matters to you, toward your values and chosen actions. The question isn't, how do I get rid of this anxiety so I can live my life? The question is, given that I have this anxiety, how do I want to live my life anyway? What action can I take right now that moves me toward what matters to me? Let me give you a concrete example. Let's say you have social anxiety, and you're constantly having thoughts like, people think I'm boring, I'm going to embarrass myself, nobody wants to talk to me. The suppression approach would be to try to stop having those thoughts before you go to a social event. But what happens when those negative thoughts show up anyway? You feel like you've failed. The acceptance and diffusion approach is different. You acknowledge, okay, my anxiety is showing up. My mind is doing its thing where it tells me scary stories about social situations. That's what anxious minds do. These are just thoughts. They might be true, they might not be. I don't need to figure that out right now. And then you ask yourself, what matters to me here? Maybe the answer is connection matters to me, or supporting my friend who invited me matters. And then you ask, given what matters to me, what action do I want to take? Maybe the answer is, I'm going to go to this event even though I'm anxious. Maybe it's, I'm going to approach one person and start a conversation even though my mind is telling me scary stories. You're not waiting for the anxiety to go away. You're taking action in the presence of the uncomfortable thoughts and feelings because the action matters to you. This is psychological flexibility, and it's one of the strongest predictors of mental health. It's not about having fewer negative thoughts. It's about being able to have those thoughts and still do what matters. Let's talk about rumination. Rumination is when you get stuck in a loop, replaying the same thoughts over and over, analyzing them, trying to solve them mentally. Why did they say that? What did they mean? What should I have said? What's wrong with me? What if this happens? Rumination feels productive. It feels like you're working on the problem. But here's the reality. Rumination is not problem solving. Problem solving is focused, has a goal, and leads to action. Rumination is circular, has no clear goal, and leads nowhere except deeper into the thought spiral. Research shows that rumination is one of the strongest predictors of depression and anxiety. So why do we do it? Part of it is that rumination gives us the illusion of control. If I just think about this enough, I'll figure it out. But that moment of resolution never comes. You can't think your way out of anxiety. Another reason we ruminate is that it's become a habit. Neural pathways in your brain strengthen with repetition. Every time you ruminate, you're reinforcing those pathways. It's like walking the same path through a forest until you've worn a deep trail. So how do you break the rumination cycle? The first step is recognizing when you're doing it. You might notice sensations in your body, tension in your shoulders, tightness in your chest. You might notice that you're having the same thoughts you had yesterday. When you catch yourself ruminating, you can use a technique called the rumination interrupt. You deliberately shift your attention to something else. Not because you're suppressing the thoughts, but because you're choosing not to feed them. You might engage your senses. What are 5 things you can see right now? What are 4 things you can hear? This grounds you in the present moment. You might do something physical. Go for a walk, do some stretching. Physical activity can help reset your nervous system. The key is asking yourself, is this thought helping me? Is going over this again for the 100th time moving me toward a solution? If it's not helping, you can make a conscious choice to redirect your attention. Let's address core beliefs. These are the deep, often unconscious beliefs we hold about ourselves, other people, and the world. They form early in life and act as filters through which we interpret everything. Common negative core beliefs include, I'm not good enough, I'm unlovable, I'm powerless, the world is dangerous, people can't be trusted. These beliefs operate in the background and generate automatic negative thoughts that seem to confirm the belief. If your core belief is, I'm not good enough, your mind will constantly scan for evidence of your inadequacy. Someone doesn't text you back? They must think you're not worth their time. You make a mistake at work? It proves you're incompetent. The belief creates a confirmation bias. You notice things that support the belief while dismissing things that contradict it. This is why positive affirmations often don't work. If you have a deep belief that you're not worthy and you stand in front of a mirror saying, I am worthy, a part of your brain is screaming that's not true. You can't just paste positive thoughts over negative core beliefs. The work here is deeper. First, you have to identify the core beliefs. What's the common theme in your negative thoughts? What's the underlying assumption? Second, you examine the evidence. Where did this belief come from? What experiences led me to form it? Is it actually true? Are there exceptions? Third, you develop more balanced beliefs. Instead of I'm not good enough, maybe I have strengths and weaknesses like everyone else. Instead of people can't be trusted, maybe some people are trustworthy, and I can learn to discern the difference. And fourth, you test the new beliefs through action. If I act as though I'm good enough, what happens? You gather new evidence. This process takes time. These beliefs formed over years, but they can change. Here's another crucial piece, the role of avoidance. When we're uncomfortable, our instinct is to avoid whatever is making us uncomfortable. We avoid situations that make us anxious. We avoid feelings that are painful. And in the short term, avoidance works. You avoid the party, you don't have to feel socially anxious. But here's the problem. Every time you avoid something, you send a message to your brain. That thing is dangerous, I can't handle it. The next time it comes up, your brain sounds an even louder alarm. Avoidance strengthens fear and anxiety. It also prevents you from learning that you can actually handle the thing you're avoiding. You never get the experience of facing the fear and surviving. The same principle applies to thoughts. If you're constantly avoiding certain thoughts, you're teaching your brain that those thoughts are dangerous. But if you can learn to allow the thoughts, to sit with them without fighting them, they lose their power. This is what happens in mindfulness practice. You sit with whatever arises and you practice just being with it. Over time, you learn that thoughts and feelings are temporary. They arise, they peak, they fade. The wave comes and the wave goes. Let's also talk about self-compassion. So many of us are incredibly harsh with ourselves. When negative thoughts arise, we often add a layer of self-judgment. I shouldn't be thinking this. What's wrong with me? Why can't I just be normal? This self-criticism makes everything worse. Research has shown that self-compassion, treating yourself with the same kindness you'd offer a friend, is associated with better mental health, more resilience, and paradoxically, more motivation to improve. When a negative thought arises, instead of beating yourself up, try responding with compassion. This is really hard right now. It makes sense that I'm having these thoughts. I'm doing the best I can. This softens the internal environment. It creates safety instead of threat. And when you feel safe, your nervous system can calm down. The negative thoughts don't feel as overwhelming because you're not fighting them and you're not fighting yourself. Now, I want to address something important. Not all negative thoughts are useless noise. Sometimes your anxiety is trying to tell you something. Sometimes your mind is pointing to a real problem. The key is discernment. Is this thought giving me useful information, or is it just anxiety spinning stories? One way to assess this is to ask, is there a concrete action I can take right now? If you're worried about your health and haven't been to a doctor, maybe schedule a checkup. If you're anxious about a relationship, maybe have a conversation. But if you're lying in bed worrying about something you can't address right now, or replaying a conversation from years ago, those thoughts aren't actionable. They're just rumination. Another important distinction is between everyday negative thoughts and symptoms of a mental health condition. If your negative thoughts are persistent, intense, and significantly interfering with your ability to function, that's a signal to seek professional help. There's no shame in this. Therapy can be incredibly helpful. So let me bring this all together. The real reason you can stop negative thoughts is because stopping them isn't how the mind works. Suppression backfires. Fighting creates struggle. Avoidance strengthens fear. Your brain is wired to focus on the negative. But here's the empowering truth. You don't need to stop negative thoughts to live a meaningful life. You need to change your relationship with those thoughts. You need to practice diffusion, creating space between you and your thoughts. You need to develop acceptance, acknowledging what's present without fighting it. You need to cultivate self-compassion. You need to interrupt rumination. You need to question core beliefs. You need to take committed action, doing what matters, even in the presence of discomfort. This is a practice. It's not something you perfect once and you're done. Some days will be easier than others. That's okay. The goal isn't to never have negative thoughts. The goal is to have those thoughts and still choose how you want to show up in your life. To let the clouds pass through the sky of your mind without getting caught in the storm. You are so much more than your thoughts. You are the consciousness that observes the thoughts. You are the one who can choose how to respond. That's your power. Not the power to control every thought, but the power to choose what you do next. So the next time you find yourself caught in a spiral, remember, you don't have to fight it. You can notice it. You can name it. You can make space for it. And then you can gently redirect to the present moment, to what matters, and take one small step in the direction you want to go. That's how you fix it. Not by stopping the thoughts, but by changing the dance. Not by winning the war, but by making peace. Not by controlling your mind, but by freeing yourself from the belief that you have to. Your thoughts don't define you. Your actions do, and you always have the power to choose your next action.